Well, hello and welcome to the channel. My name's Johnny and you are watching Hillbilly Modeling. And welcome to part 6 of our He162 A-2 Salamander by Tamiya in 1/48 scale. And in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to do our decals and we're going to do panel line. And then also we're going to attach our landing gear and those landing gear bay doors and all that little stuff and get that stuff taken care of. And so let's go ahead and jump down to the bench and get started. So we're going to start off this part of the build with taking a look at all of our decals. Now it's a pretty good idea to take and familiarize yourself with where all these go, and that way you can kind of make out a plan. And I think probably the best approach is to do all the little bitty stuff first, and then we'll get to the bigger ones later on. That way we get those little ones knocked out. So here's our decal sheet, and as you can see, there's quite a few decals here. There's enough for 3 different versions of the aircraft. Of course, we're only going to build one version. Now, we've already used the decals for the cockpit area, the seat belts and the instrument cluster and everything. So what we have left here is everything on the exterior of the aircraft. Now, Tamiya has included these decals here, which YouTube does not like, so we'll be leaving them off in this part of the build because, well, we don't want to get the video canceled for any reason. So we're going to need some materials. These are water slide type decals. So we have our water. I also have 2 self-clamping tweezers to help hold the decals, and a regular set of tweezers too, along with a toothpick that can help adjust the decals, and a cotton swab for kind of drying everything off. We also have our micro saw and micro set. Now the micro set is to help adhesion, and then the micro saw is for getting them to lay down. And I use 2 different brushes for those. I don't mix the brushes up between them. And then we're also going to need a pair of scissors to cut and separate our decals from the main decal sheet. That way we can just concentrate on one at a time. Now I like to use these self-gripping tweezers to hold our decal sheet. That way I don't get it lost down in our little cup of water there and don't have to fish that out. And then I use the second set of self-gripping tweezers to kind of suspend that right in the water, as you can see there. That way it can go ahead and soak up that water and loosen that decal up off that backing sheet for us while we prepare the rest of the model to receive our decal. And what we're going to be doing is going to use a little bit of micro set. And as I stated before, I use separate brushes for the micro set and the micro saw. I don't use the same brush because these are 2 different products. One, the micro saw is really aggressive and softens the decal, and I don't want to be doing that at the moment. And then we can go ahead and remove our decal from the water, and we'll dry off the excess water there, and then we can check it and make sure that it's ready to slide. As you can see here, it's ready to go. Now these decals are fairly thick, so I'll be able to remove it right from the paper and then place it on rather than sliding it from the paper onto the actual model. This allows me to see exactly where I'm putting it and hopefully get it as straight as possible when we place it down. And then I just use the toothpick there to make small adjustments, as you can see here. Now once we get it lined up exactly where we want it, and that one edge is gonna kind of overlap a little bit, but that's okay. We'll take care of that with the micro saw later. We will pick up our cotton bud or Q-tip, whichever you prefer, and we're just going to make sure that it sticks in place. So I like to just start on one end of it there and get it to adhere to the surface. As you can see, it kind of moved around on us there, and that's partly because of the X22 clear coat that we sprayed on. That gloss clear does make the surface a little slippery, but it also helps in keeping the possibility of the silvering where the decal doesn't really adhere to the model too well, and we don't want that. So after we've soaked off the excess water, we do have one little edge sticking up, so we'll go ahead and use the micro saw to soften up that decal and let those edges kind of lay down better for us. One word of caution, once you apply this micro saw, don't touch that area anymore until it's dry. You can always come back in and add more micro saw later and get the decal to lay down for you. If you use a whole lot and then you're pressing on it too much at this point, you can move it around. And I always recap these bottles so I don't knock them off and spill everything everywhere. Now there are a lot of decals in this kit, and I know, you know, most modelers tend to skip over all those little bitty decals, those small things, which are instructions for maintenance oftentimes. Don't step here and what have you, but they're really small decals. Do take the time to put all of those small decals on because it really adds that extra bling to our model, and it really improves the look of the model. So don't rush your decals. Take your time with them. Now these are thick, really thick decals, as you can see here. Now if you're using really small decals, I suggest that you don't pull the decal off the paper and do slide the paper out from underneath it onto the model. But since these Tamiya ones are really thick, we don't have any problems with it folding up on itself. Now, since on the wings here, we're going to want to make sure that everything is straight. So I'm just kind of measuring up from the leading edge of the wing here to make sure that we're as square as possible with that edge, because that's kind of what it looks like in our decal instructions, and we want to get it positioned correctly. That way we'll be able to duplicate the decal that's on the opposite wing. Now if it does move a little bit on us, we will take and straighten it up, and you can always refloat these if necessary. Well, most of the time you can refloat them. Everything has its place, I guess. And I'm just going to press down that edge so that it's not moving around on me, and I want to double check my measurement, make sure that it has stayed in place, and then we're going to press down the center. We want to remove as much of that solution from underneath as possible, but we don't want the decal to move on us, so a real light touch is called for here. And we'll just press it down, kind of soak around the edges there a little bit. Well, what I mean is to kind of wick out with the cotton bud that excess fluid around the edges. And then I'm just going to very gently press down in the center there, kind of coaxing those large bubbles out. And once we get that done, we'll just leave it alone and move on to the next decal. Now once our decals have fully dried, we're going to use the X22 again just to go over the decal areas and seal those in. And of course I have thinned it with the X20 A thinner, which I highly recommend to use the Tamiya thinner with the Tamiya paints, because they are not water-based. They are a solvent-based acrylic, and if you mix water with it, you're going to end up with a mess. So now once our clear coat has fully dried, we can apply our panel liner. I'm just going to use this Tamiya black panel accent here to help bring out all those little details on the aircraft that you wouldn't otherwise see. I'm going to be using this really pointy number 2 brush here. That'll hold plenty of product for us and give us more control over the application. And also we have some Testors enamel thinner, because this panel liner is an enamel product, and this will help with the application and also with cleanup. So one of my viewers, I'm sorry, I have forgotten who it was that mentioned it, said that it would be a much better application, and it'll help the flow if we apply a little bit of enamel thinner onto the areas where we want our panel liner to go. And I have not done this in the past, so we're going to go ahead and give it a try here. So I'm going to load the brush up with the panel liner, and we're going to very carefully just touch it right into those little seams that we want this panel liner to go into. And it does seem that that enamel thinner is really doing its job. It's really helping it flow, so I don't have to touch the surface in too many spots with the brush. That's going to really help with cleanup, because we won't have as many areas to dress up later on. So that flows pretty good. And then we'll continue the process on down the model, adding the enamel thinner, and then adding our panel liner to it. And we're just going to work one section at a time. I'm just going to do the tops of the wings first, and then we'll move on to different areas of the aircraft. And that way we can concentrate on making sure that we don't miss any panel lines, and we get everything that we want the panel liner on, actually on it. So we'll continue this process around the entire aircraft. Now when it comes to cleanup, we just use a clean brush with a little bit of enamel thinner on it, and we can just wipe away, kind of like using it as an eraser to clean up those areas. Just make sure that the panel liner is dry before you start this. Otherwise, the brush can soak the panel liner up out of the panel lines where we actually want it to stay. So make sure that it is dry enough that you're not pulling that panel liner back up off the model, and we're just actually erasing those little spots where we don't want it to stay. Now another option that we can use to remove excess panel liner is with our cotton bud or Q-tip, and we just load it with just a very little enamel thinner and soak off most of that. That way you're not flooding the surface of the aircraft or the model, whatever model you're working on. And then we can just lightly go over all these high spots and clean up the excess panel liner that way. And this works really good, especially on large areas, and it gets the job done for us. Just remember, if you use a lot of thinner, you will start to soften and dissolve the panel liner that's down in the groove, and the cotton bud will also act as a sponge and soak your panel liner back up. So it's very important that you keep that Q-tip as dry as possible, and yet just damp enough to get the job done. And as you can see here, it works really well, and not much fuss, and it cleans it up. So moving on to our engine, there's a lot of black on this engine, and those details aren't very visible, as you can see there. They kind of get lost in the color. So we're going to use this Mr. Weathering Color Gray panel liner here to kind of bring those out. And it's pretty much the same method that we've used on the rest of the aircraft. We'll start off with adding just a little bit of clean enamel thinner, and then I'm just going to use a small pointed brush here and just touch it to it. And as you can see, our panel liner is flowing pretty good around on this flat painted surface, and that's going to help bring out all that little detail that we wouldn't otherwise be able to see very well. So we did use the black panel liner on all of the metallic surfaces, and the gray panel liner on all the black surfaces, and that kind of gives it a little bit more of a dirtier, used look. So with that complete, as you can see here, we've got all of our decals on, we've got all of our panel liner on, and it's looking pretty good. So the next thing we need to do is we need to seal in all of our work and really protect everything. Now you can see here, I will note that the very nose of the aircraft is supposed to be black, but I figured I would mess that up, and it was kind of touch and go with that decal around the nose anyway, so I've decided just to leave that in that light blue color. So now we're going to seal everything up, and we're going to use this Model Masters Acryl Flat Clear, and it is a water-based acrylic to spray everything down and give it a nice flat tone to it. Well, it's not a flat tone, but a flat appearance. So we are going to go in and have to do a little bit of cleanup. We're going to use alcohol for that, just regular rubbing alcohol. Whatever percentage you have is fine. It doesn't really matter for this. And what we have here is we have 2 pins that our nacelle is mounted to with those polycaps. And polycaps don't slide over acrylic paints very well at all. As a matter of fact, they can get stuck, and we don't want to be, breaking the model or anything. So the rubbing alcohol really helps with this cleanup, and it goes really quick, and it'll clean that right off the metal for us. Just make sure that you don't get it on the painted surfaces, because that would remove it from the model as well. So next up, we're going to remove all of our protection here for painting that we masked up and stuffed into our cockpit there, that cotton, because we're kind of done with that. There shouldn't be any more painting left to do on the fuselage, and we can start with our final assembly, but we can't really do that with all this in the way. So we're going to go ahead and remove all that masking from the cockpit area. And of course it's time to remove all of our masking from the windscreen. And of course, with clear plastic parts, I always expect something to go wrong. So I kind of expect it to happen here too, because during the painting process, some of that mask wanted to keep kind of trying to peel up. And of course there are other parts of the mask that doesn't want to come off at all. So it's kind of how it works. So we're just going to keep working on this until we get it kind of all removed. Being very careful not to scratch the clear part, because we don't want to do that. And as I feared, you can see that there is a, paint on the windscreen. So we're going to have to see what we can do about that. Now when it comes to water-based acrylics, usually you can just take a toothpick or cocktail stick, whichever you prefer, and slightly rub it very gently, and it'll usually come right off, and the wood has the ability to kind of buff a clear part a little bit, and you'll probably never notice that there was any paint on it. However, I am having trouble here because it doesn't really want to come off, and I believe that is mostly the Tamiya clear coat, which is a solvent-based paint. So what I've decided to do is use a rubbing compound here, just very little applied to the tip of the Q-tip here, and I am just going to buff that out, or try to buff it out, and it seems to be working. I don't want to get down into the paint on the frame, and here one of those really pointed cotton buds would work out really well. I don't have one, but I'll just get as close as I can. And that seems to be working. It seems to have buffed that out for us and removed that paint. So the next thing to do is take the other end of the Q-tip, which is clean, And we'll just buff off all of that residue and give it a final polish here. And I think it's going to do the job for us. So let's see what we got. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So the polishing compound that I've used is this right here. It just happens to be what I had on hand. So I thought I'd give it a try. And it is Flitz. And it is a metal polish and fiberglass cleaner. It's made in Germany, and it works really good. I'm really pleased with the outcome there. And as you can see, this is an old tube. I've had it around forever, and it came in handy for this. So with that little crisis averted, we can go ahead and start some assembly here. And we can go ahead and put our ejection seat back in, and it's just a T slot and a T on the back of the seat, and we just push it down into place. And remember, we removed that for painting so we get that big cotton ball down inside it. And now we can start working on attaching things like our wheels and of course our bay doors and stuff. So we're going to start with our wheels, and they don't fit very well because of the paint that's actually on the axle there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to open that hole up a little bit using a drill bit appropriately sized for the axle itself, and it is still kind of a snug fit, which is okay because it'll hold it in perfect alignment for us, and we also won't have to use any glue on it. So if later on we find that we might want to remove these for some reason, they'll come off again. So I just want to check our alignment, and it looks pretty good. So now we can go ahead and turn our attention to the landing gear bay doors, and they do fit rather snugly, which is nice to see. Of course, everything on this kit has fit really well. Just want to make sure their alignment's good. And here I'm going to use a little bit of Tamiya Extra Thin just to attach it. That way it'll be nice and secure. I don't think I need to use the super glue or CA glue here because it is a nice tight fit. So a little bit of glue and that'll take care of it for us. And we'll go ahead and attach the rest of the components for our landing gear and landing gear bay doors in the same manner. So next up we have our autocannons, which we need to attach to the aircraft. I mean, where would we be without our main armament, right? Now these guns do have a half round and keyed socket that they have to mate together. So we're going to have to be careful when we go to insert these because can't really see what we're doing too much there. But I am just going to put just a little bit of Tamiya Extra Thin on it. And then we're just going to slide them into place. And if I can get it in there. So a little bit tedious. Want to be careful I don't want to scratch the paint off. Looks like I got a little spot there. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Alignment is important here. So we just want to make sure that we got it pressed in and that it's linear with the rest of the aircraft. We don't need our barrels being pointed in towards the nose or anything. So just check our alignment and make sure that we're in good shape there. So next we can attach the nacelle. So here's our engine nacelle. This is in the closed configuration. We'll go ahead and place that onto the aircraft. So it just aligns with those two steel pins, and we just press it down. And those polycaps kind of want to push it up a little bit. But if you work it, it will it will go down and seat. And once we get it on there, that's starting to look like an aircraft. Yeah, I really like the look of this plane. And now we can go ahead and stick our canopy on. And hopefully the paint didn't mess up our alignment or make it too tight. It seems to be just right. So I'm happy with that. And we have one more part that we need to go ahead and stick on. And sticking out of the nose of the aircraft, I believe this is some sort of an antenna. And it is a really tight fit. That's why I didn't glue it. And I haven't glued it yet. We may before the end of the build, but there may come an occasion where I may want to remove it. So we'll just go ahead and stick that into place. So this is where we're at in the build. It doesn't look like it, but we did get quite a bit done. We got our panel liner and our decals, and averted that little emergency that we had with the paint on the windscreen. Managed to get that polished out, and that's a great relief to me, because you know, clear parts on an aircraft is one of those eye-catching things, and if there's something wrong with it, well, it kind of detracts from the entire kit. And the Flitz polishing compound, that worked really well, so I'll have to remember that trick. And I hope maybe that will help you out if you have an issue with your clear parts too. Alright, so that's going to wrap up part 6 of our He162 A-2 Salamander, and I think it's looking pretty good. This is the first time that we've actually got the entire aircraft assembled, and it actually looks like a plane. And that's a great relief for me anyway. So we still got some more things to do. We need to do our pilot. We still got to pin up our pilot, get him taken care of, and of course, you know, our engines, well, they look a little bit too fresh. So we're going to have to do some things about that. Now, these aircraft weren't used very much. They came at the very, very close of the war, so a whole lot of weathering and beating and banging on them is probably not necessary in order for them to fit into a historical content. So, and that's another thing we need to think about, some sort of content. Well, we'll see what happens in the next video, huh? So, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of my subscribers. It's because of you guys that I keep making these videos. And if you are new to the channel and you like what you see, I hope today that I earned your subscription, and give me a like if you like this video. So until next time, guys, stay safe.